Welcome, vintage kart fans. Welcome to Welty Racing. I'm Steve Welty. Sean's running the video camera, so you don't get to see him. So lately we've been getting a lot of requests. Brazilians, Asians, Japanese, a lot of foreign requests for specifications on a vintage kart. My response has been kind of in the past is you need to find one, figure out what the specifications are on them, and then kind of copy something or gives you an idea what to go by. Then we're realizing that it might not be so easy for you to find a vintage kart. So I'm just going to go over some of the basic general dimensions here that might help you if you want to create your own vintage kart wherever you happen to live. So this is pretty much a standard wheelbase right here. And axle center to axle center, this kart's 43 inches. Now, that would still give you a very good handling kart. If you get a kart that some of them were as short as 40 inches, those karts are going to be pretty hard for you to get in unless you're really small. So at 43 inches, you still have a kart that really turns, really burns up the track really well. We do build them up to 2 inches longer than this for really tall guys. The handling on a tight track will come back and bite you just a little bit, but they're still pretty darn good. We actually run that length in our dual engine karts, so you can get around the track really quickly. So this is basically a wheelbase that you would want to consider in your length. And it's a kart that a person that's up to 5'10" can fit into quite easily. Now, if we move here to the front just a little bit more, most of the kingpins, between the two kingpins on most of the vintage karts is around 24 inches. And we're just a little bit more, we're about 25 and a half on this kart. So really not too much different.
And we're talking about a kingpin is right there.
The kingpin. This is the kingpin. So kingpin to kingpin. Most of your modern sprint karts are at 26 inches, by the way. So some things haven't changed that much. Now, most of the vintage karts, you're going to find out that in the 60s they were like 24 between kingpins. Kingpin angle, I build karts on 2 degrees and I build karts on 7 degrees. 7 degrees is a kart that handles really well, but it steers relatively easy yet, so you can run a lot of laps and not get worn out driving it. You go to 0 to 2 degrees, Bug and some of those were at 0 to 2 degrees. The old Myers was at 0 degrees. Those karts will wear you out in 10 laps. They steer really hard, but you got a tremendous amount of front end bite. Now some of the karts will go as much as 15 degrees of kingpin inclination, and that works on some karts it doesn't. Drivers have to get used to that, because what it does when you turn, it picks up the rear wheel really quickly. It jacks the kart. And on a rear kart, I've seen, there are a couple karts, and I won't mention which ones they are necessarily, I don't want to blast anybody's kart, but there are a couple karts that pick up the back wheel and put you on your head if you're not careful. So you got to be careful how much kingpin inclination you run. Camber, you basically want camber to be at 0 on these karts. Running on a relatively narrow tire, 0 camber works about the best. So some of the other things we'll just run by here, like the frame rails here on this kart are 15 inches outside to outside. So that gives you an idea right there how wide your nose is going to be, and this is pretty close to a general. It won't vary more than an inch on hardly any vintage kart. If you're going to build your vintage kart yourself, now whether it's a one-piece perimeter frame like this is, or it's one that the frame comes all the way back and makes part of the seat, it's not going to really make any difference. Your bend right here is going to be about the same place on all of these karts. there is a difference in the stiffness. But an example right here, this is 19 inches from the back of the axle to that first bend. Now we'll come around here to the back end of the cart, give you an idea what the back end is. We're at 19.5 inches outside to outside on this rail. Now that's going to be the basic within 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of just about all the carts that run straight down to the seat. Whether you got a Rupp, whether you got an Alley Cat, probably a King that runs under the axle wouldn't really be any different. A couple of the carts that are going to be different is you're going to have things like a Bug or a Fox. Those carts, as that rail runs toward the seat, it's narrow back here, and then it steps out and goes to the seat rail. Those carts are going to be about 17.5 inches in the back to the bends. So you can kind of start to see the variation of the different carts and where the bends are to help you actually build one. You're looking at height, and this is sitting on the rear of the seat, which is basically where the floor pan is. And so the back of this seat's about 18 inches high. So you're about 18 inches up, and we obviously, you can set your angle wherever you want for your slant of your seat. The steering, normally I build that so that the top of the steering up here, where the bushing is about 13.5 inches off of the floor pan. And that puts the steering wheel at about the right height for most drivers. Once in a while somebody's really big, and really big could mean really tall or really heavy. And if either one of those becomes the case, you're going to want that steering to be a little bit higher. And I'll also run that, and I'll give you an idea here, down to where the steering hub is, and this is with the upholstery in there, so it would be 1 inch more. I would have about 25 inches in this cart. So that gets the steering wheel out away from you far enough that you're not all jammed into the cart. Same thing with the pedals. People are always asking me, well, how come your pedals aren't lined up? Well, when you get in the cart, the only time this pedal is in this position is when it's at idle, or you're not in the cart, because just starting the cart, you're going to open the throttle up. Guess what? Now they're lined up with each other. So the only time this is like set back is when it's just sitting there doing nothing. And you probably move the throttle that far and you haven't even engaged the clutch yet. So we're trying to keep you, without having to angle your foot down too much to be able to run the cart at full throttle. Also, we want to stay away from the tie rods enough here too that we aren't hitting the tie rods with the pedal. So that might give you a better idea how to try and build this, your vintage cart. Again, 1 inch tubing, 83 wall is pretty much the standard. If you're not using chrome moly tubing, I would suggest you use 95 wall. What you'll find out is a lot of these tubings aren't really what they're supposed to be. You could order 95 wall and you'll probably get 89 thousandths. You order 83 wall, you probably get 79 thousandths. Dimensions aren't exactly correct when you actually measure the tubing out. Set these carts up with about 1.5 inches of ground clearance on them.
Rear axle width.
Oh yeah, should do the width. I build the carts so that you're not tipping over in them all the time. This is my own cart. This cart's 37.5 inches wide, outside to outside. And I build the cart so it's pretty close to square. 37 and a half in the back. It's going to be about 37 and a half in the front. And you can pan up on me a little bit. So again, actually my cart is a 1/4 inch per side wider in the front than it is in the rear. I actually like a cart that's wider in the nose than it is in the rear. It does not push. You steer around the corner better, but I prefer to have them either square or just a tad wider in the front. So if your cart's only about 36 inches wide, they start to get a little bit tippy. And I've seen some of these carts at 34, 35 inches wide. They're a handful to try and stay upright in. So hopefully this points you in a direction that allows you to be able to maybe put something together vintage if you're in an area that you're not going to find a vintage cart. You know, we could probably go over more specifications and that, but at some point you just have to start in, and when you get all done you look at it and say, yeah, that looks about right. That's what a vintage cart should look like. You know, because you're probably not going to find something in your area to copy. So hopefully these tips are helpful. Is there anything you want to cover, Sean?
A lot of people ask us where we mount our cameras at for the racing and stuff. Well, right there
This is
a
one mount.
Replay XD mount right there. Replay XD looks like a little flashlight. It's a 25 millimeters in diameter, basically, looking like a little flashlight with a little holder, and this is actually the base plate that the camera slides in. So that's when you see our bumper cam mounts. That's where we're actually filming from. And then we got a mount back here that uses a little tripod mount that we can angle and point the camera basically wherever we want from the rear or forward or whatever. So if you're interested, that's where what we're doing there. That kind of mount work with a GoPro or a Replay or whatever, whoever's mount camera you're using. So yeah, and some of the GoPros, they actually, like one of our Welty racers, he puts his GoPro right in the bumper. Sets it basically just inside the bumper where the number plate, we got the number plate at right now. Works really well.